LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 28 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really good show for you tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows. This week from 4 of the big 5 corporate outlets. No NBC Meet the Press this week, which was again preempted by sports, so just ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, other than NBC. I'll also have a little political comedy this week from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Bill Maher was back after a 2-week European tour, or Northern European, I guess. You can see all the topics I'm covering listed down in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, you should see time indexes down there to skip to the topics that most interest you. Tonight's topics include Hillary Clinton's run for the presidency in 2016. She attacked Republican candidates this week on voter ID, and she got a new opponent for the Democratic nomination. Lincoln Chafee, a former Republican, joined the Democratic field. I'll also have several clips on China, which was probably the source of the largest hack attack against the U.S. government in history, apparently. And there'll be a little comparison to the threat from Russia at the end of that topic. And I'll also have several clips on the perennial topic of the fight against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, though I'll also have some comments about ISIS in tonight's first topic. And that first topic is going to take about half of tonight's clips, not because all the clips are so important, but because it now involves so many people, which means, of course, I'm talking about the double-digit number of Republican candidates running for president already, which Bill Maher made fun of during his monologue last Friday, as well as targeting one of the most recent entrants, Rick Perry, over in this clip.
Because there are now 10 Republicans running for president. Isn't that awesome? That clown car is filling up, yeah. You know who got in it this week? Rick Perry. Remember Rick Perry from 2012? Yeah, we all remember 2012 Rick Perry. But Rick says, I am not that guy at all anymore. In fact, he says, call me Caitlin. He really wants to get away from it. Oh, yeah.
So that was kind of amusing. And before I get to some of the substantive clips on the Republican candidates, and I'm going to show clips of several candidates that are running for president, some declared, some not declared. I think I've got Lindsey Graham, Rick Perry, Scott Walker, and at least Rick Santorum. That's the other one, I think, is all the ones I'm showing today. But before I get to that, I want to show an interesting analysis from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher again. This is from Bill Maher's New Rules, where he talked about how Republicans and conservatives have this persecution complex about Christians being persecuted by the left-wing political establishment and the left-wing media. And Bill Maher talks about how he's really the only person on the left who is attacking religion. Nobody else is, and it doesn't make that much sense. And I'll talk about that a little more if you see that clip over here.
This idea that everybody on the left is plotting against Christianity and wants to wipe out religion is offensive to me. Because I'm the only media figure with a show week in and week out that says that. And I'll be damned if the credit's going to go to the entire left when I'm doing all the heavy lifting. Well, actually, there are 2 others who have been my allies in this. Because that's the rule in America. You can mock religion if you're a cartoon dog or a child in a cartoon. But when Jeb Bush says, how strange in our own time to hear Christianity spoken of as some sort of backward and oppressive force, who else is talking about it that way? Is it Nancy Pelosi? No. Harry Reid? No. Obama? He says he wakes up to scripture on his BlackBerry. Obama does every show on TV except this one because he can't even be seen with an atheist. I gave him $1 million. He treats me like I lent him $1 million. So who? Who are we talking about? Hillary? No. Bill? Biden? Al Gore? Al Franken? Elizabeth Warren? Jesse Jackson? Who? Nobody. That's who. Sean Hannity says the liberal media's war against religion is alive and well. Okay, so it's more of the media thing, like my friend Ariana from the liberal Huffington Post, because she's written 3 books about faith. I know, because we argue about it after sex. Is it the liberal gang at MSNBC? Because I've never heard any of them say anything anti-religion. One of them is a reverend. One of them attacks me when I attack religion. Is it the late night guys? Because I never hear any of them do it either. Is it Ellen or Rosie or Chelsea? We know it's not Oprah. Michael Moore, he's the liberal Republicans hate the most. No, he's a Catholic. This guy's so Catholic, he teaches Sunday school on Sunday. In the morning, when normal people are just getting in from an after party. I really want to know, where is religion belittled in the liberal world?
Of course, there is an answer. There is a left-wing atheist community and even an anti-theist community online, but Bill Maher has a really good point that in terms of politicians and the establishment media, there isn't really anyone attacking Christians, and Christians are the majority, they're not persecuted, and it is sort of a ridiculous part of Republican and conservative theology as Christians that they're persecuted, and I don't quite understand it. You can let me know what you think about that clip down in the video description, and like as usual, I put a link. I don't know if the entire New Rules is on the YouTube page, but you can get a lot of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher by looking at the links down in the video description to either the HBO page or their YouTube channel, where they put a lot of the video this year. Now, having shown the political comedy about the Republican candidates at the beginning there, I want to move on to something a little more substantive. This is from CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash did her show live from Iowa, where the first caucuses are held in the political campaign. So, where that's in January. It's not that far away, and the Democratic senator from Iowa, Tom Harkin, who retired, used to have this steak fry where he would invite all the Democratic candidates. Well, he was replaced by a Republican, Joni Ernst, the famous, I castrated hogs, and so I'm going to cut pork in Washington, if you remember that. I'm going to show a clip from that ad in just a minute in another summary of what happened in Iowa. But this is Dana Bash's summary on CNN State of the Union, and it includes several statements from the candidates. There were many candidates in Iowa, and you can see it from this morning here.
Good morning again. We are live from Iowa with a special edition of State of the Union. And Joni Ernst became a national figure here. Excuse me, Iowa. Start that again. Iowa Democratic Senator Tom Harkin held a steak fry that was a must-attend for would-be Democratic presidential candidates. When Harkin retired, Republican Joni Ernst won his seat, and this weekend she started her own tradition.
When hundreds gather on their motorcycles at a local Harley barn, you know it's not your typical political event. But on those bikes, under those helmets, Wisconsin Governor and likely presidential candidate Scott Walker and the host of the event, freshman Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst. This is the first annual Roast and Ride, a new take on the classic Iowa presidential cattle call and the GOP place to be this weekend.
Great meeting you today.
7 Republican presidential hopefuls showed up to try to wow the crowd with 8-minute speeches.
There isn't a country in the world that I would trade places with.
So you want proof that this is not your typical political event? Check this out. You can't count the number of Harleys in this parking lot. The people who rode here from Des Moines to Boone, where we are, 38 miles, just to come for a chance to ride, but also listen to some candidates speak.
I learned that in Iowa, if you fall behind your float, you can hitch a ride with a nice gentleman on his John Deere tractor.
Good afternoon. I'm from southern Iowa.
It's not just about the speeches, it's also trying to sign up voters, get people who could potentially come to the Iowa caucuses for each candidate. This is Mike Huckabee's booth, and check this out. Over here, Ben Carson's booth, and guess who just showed up? It's Ben Carson himself. It's certainly not your typical crowd with Harley riders, right?
Well, it's wonderful to know that people, want your autograph and want your picture and just want to shake your hand and talk to you.
Mike Huckabee is the only one here who has actually won the Iowa caucuses back in 2008.
The last time I was in Iowa with you, you had a big victory.
We did have a big victory, and we're hoping for another one. I don't take anything for granted, and I've often said that when you see a turtle on a fence post, there's one thing you can be certain: he didn't get there by himself.
Okay, so let's see what they've got at Scott Walker's booth. Okay, well, first of all, we've got a book. I didn't know they came before an order. And a beer holder. I mean, what's more important than this, right? Look who's coming, right there. Beer holders. I mean, what's more important than that?
Beer and cheese, right? Beer, cheese.
How was the ride?
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of people were out with flags and kids along the route, so it was a lot of fun going with Joni. Although I said with all the cameras, Joni and I were laughing after, saying, glad we didn't pick her nose and ride or anything like that, because everybody's really intense.
Walker was the only 2016er to actually ride with Joni Ernst. Rick Perry had his own ride with veterans.
It's good to be out on the road.
And Florida's Marco Rubio told a voter he's used to a different kind of riding, Miami style.
If we can get a jet ski ride going, I can take her. Yeah?
Even freshman Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton showed up.
You're not running for president, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So what brings you to the roast and ride, or the ride and roast?
It started out as a coincidence. My in-laws live up the road, and my wife and I just had our baby, so they're visiting Grandma and Grandpa, and I was in the area for the weekend, and Joni invited me to come down and say a few words about our veterans.
That's what enticed a lot of Iowans, too.
What drew you out here today?
I'm Joni Ernst and the motorcycles. And I believe in what she stands for, the veterans and everything. So I'm here to support her causes, the veterans.
So this is going to be a chance for these presidential candidates to talk to some new voters, right?
Exactly.
Are you leaning either way?
Not generally, nope. I'm just here to find out what they have to say, and I'll make up my mind, when it gets closer.
We told you a lot about the riding part of the roast and ride, so what about the roast? Here it is, not nearly as exciting as the riding.
Well, I don't know what you think about that, but having a big Harley ride and a pig roast instead of a steak fry, I guess that's the Republican version of Tom Harkin's steak fry, and this is the first annual, but I guess Joni Ernst is planning to be around as a senator from Iowa for quite a while, and she's getting people to owe her favors as she owed them favors because she had such a close election, and a lot of these candidates actually stumped for her back when she won her really close election in Iowa. One of the Republicans who may be the front runner in Iowa, although it's hard to tell, especially at this early stage, is the Republican governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, and he gave an interview to ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Their reporter, Jonathan Karl, talked to him and first had an introduction that made him look they kept saying not in this clip, but several people said he looked really good on the motorcycle in the leather, and I thought he looked, especially with the helmet on, he looked kind of like a little kid, and I don't know, I thought it was almost Michael Dukakis in the Tank level of looking silly in a helmet, but you can see the cool intro that Jonathan Karl gave him, then asked him if he was the front runner, and he tried to pin it on Jeb Bush, as you can see over here.
I love a senator who knows how to castrate a pig, ride a hog, and cut the pork from Washington, D.C. Now, wouldn't it be nice to give her an ally in the White House to help get the job done?
That was the man many are now calling the Republican frontrunner, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, talking about freshman Senator Joni Ernst. She's the Republican behind the roast and ride, who may be Iowa's new kingmaker. I was out there and had a chance to talk to Walker before he jumped on his Harley. He's not quite a declared presidential candidate yet, but as we saw here in Iowa this weekend, Scott Walker is already hitting high gear. racing towards the front of the pack on his Harley and in the polls. So Governor Walker, you're up in the polls nationally. You got a big lead here in Iowa. You're the front runner now?
I think Governor Bush is still probably out there up front just because he's going to have more money than just about all of us combined. But we're feeling good.
But you said...
And then this next question that I cut off there is Jonathan Karl tries really hard to get Governor Scott Walker to go negative on Jeb Bush. He quotes, you'll hear the quote, it's something about how we don't need dynasties, legacies, monarchies in the White House. And it's obviously meant to be a hit against both Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. But you can see Scott Walker is one of those guys, I guess, who wants to like go negative without looking like he's going negative, or at least against other Republicans, because he keeps denying that it's an attack on Jeb Bush. He keeps trying to redirect it over to Hillary Clinton over in this clip.
You said not long ago that people don't want an anointed leader in America. They don't want someone who's part of a monarchy or of a legacy. You were talking about Hillary Clinton, but doesn't that apply to Jeb Bush too?
Well, I mean, I think it's really the contrary. I hope Republicans, I hope independents, and even some discerning Democrats will see we're striking a stark contrast with Hillary Clinton. You know, we're new, fresh face, taking on someone from the past.
If you got to run in this Republican primary first, Jeb Bush, this would be the third Bush. You're talking about a monarchy, a legacy. Doesn't that apply to Jeb?
Well, but again, I think it's one of those where in a Republican primary, if we were to get in, people want to see how you're going to step up and contrast yourself with Hillary Clinton. And the fact that she's not going through a primary, or at least a real primary, she's not going to be highly contested out there, I think is a disadvantage, not just for the Democrats, it's a disadvantage for the American people.
So you say...
So, yeah, like I said, he won't attack Jeb Bush, but he did differentiate himself from some candidates by trying to be on the hawkish side. You know, I mentioned before I was going to show some comments about ISIS in this topic of the Republican candidates, and here's where I'm going to, or the split in the Republican Party, and I'm going to show several here, starting with Scott Walker talking about his willingness to send in ground troops, but not quite as hawkish as Lindsey Graham, because he's not going to do it immediately, but he won't rule it out. And he said he wouldn't even rule out a huge invasion of Iraq if it was in U.S. national security interest over in... Let me make sure I don't play the wrong clip here. Yeah, clip number 6 over here.
Okay, you've been very critical of how the president's handled ISIS. Some are out there, like Lindsey Graham, saying we should send 10,000 U.S. ground troops right now to Iraq to help with this fight. Do you favor that?
No, I think we shouldn't rule anything out. I think that's a big mistake this president has made here and elsewhere about saying how long we would go or how much we would invest.
I'm not talking about ruling it out. I'm saying, would you do that?
No, I'm not arguing that's the first approach. I'd tell you 3 specific things I think we should do in Iraq. First, we should re-engage the strength of the American forces that are there. Once you do that, you empower our the allied forces that are there on behalf of Iraq to reclaim the territory that ISIS has taken. And third, you just need to make sure you do it in a way that doesn't provide safe haven into places like Syria as you push them out.
So you would not send combat troops now to Iraq?
No, I don't. I believe right now we have a capacity to reclaim Iraq with the Iraqi forces are there as long as we unleash the power that's already there of the American armed forces.
And you say you wouldn't rule out anything, though. Does that include, I mean, would you rule out a full-blown U.S. reinvasion of Iraq and Syria?
I don't think we should ever send a message to our foes as to how far we're willing to go.
So you wouldn't rule out a full-blown reinvasion?
I would not rule out boots on the ground. I think...
No, but I'm asking, would you rule out a full-blown reinvasion of Iraq?
If the national interests of this country are at stake, here at risk in this country or abroad, that's, to me, the standard of what we do for military engagement.
So that is pretty hawkish, I guess. Well, I think I... Is that a little better in terms? Did I turn my audio down? Yeah, I think that's a little bit. That's pretty hawkish, but not quite as hawkish as Lindsey Graham. I'm going to show a clip of Lindsey Graham now on CNN State of the Union talking to Dana Bash, where she gets him to say that he is in favor of ground troops, and you know, it's a kind of a funny question. She contrasts his views to Obama's Hope campaign and calls his campaign doom and gloom, and he says no, it's not doom and gloom, it's just like reduce the debt and reduce terrorism. And then he goes into this whole thing about how he's in favor of ground troops, and she asks him about this comment that, you know, don't vote for me if you don't want war, and he said, well, I don't like war, but war is necessary, I guess. I'll talk about it a little more after you watch that clip here.
It is.
Now I know.
The last time this country elected a new president, it was on hope and change. You seem to be running on doom and gloom.
Not at all. I'm running on what I think to be honest assessment of where we're at. Too much debt, too many terrorists. So here is the pitch. If you think we can protect America without some troops having to go back overseas and fight for a very long time, most likely, then I'm not your guy. Radical Islam is not going to be defeated just by armies over there. We have to be part of those armies. It's going to be a generational struggle. It's not just about killing terrorists. Building a schoolhouse for a poor girl in a remote region of Afghanistan will do more damage to the Taliban. Been to the region over 30 times. I understand how hard it's going to be, but the good news is most people in that region don't want to buy what ISIL's selling, but there is no way that we're going to defend this country under the current construct.
But in all seriousness, you are basically promising that troops are going to go into that region. And you've even said, if you as a voter don't want war, don't vote for me.
I didn't say you don't want, nobody wants war. If you don't want to defend the nation from radical Islam, don't vote for me. I don't know how you defend the nation without some of our forces going back to Iraq to help the Iraqi army. This is our war too. I'm not going to outsource our national security to a bunch of armies that don't know how to fight. How do you deal with Syria without forming an army in the region, and how do they win without us?
Let's talk about...
So if you don't want war, don't like war, I don't know, parse it however you want, but Lindsey Graham is definitely positioning himself as the most hawkish of all the Republican candidates, which is kind of interesting, I guess. And I want to also show this isn't an actual presidential candidate. This is Representative Peter King of New York, who is often rabidly anti-Islam and militaristic, especially in terms of sending troops to the Middle East. And I want to show something he said over on Fox News Sunday talking to Chris Wallace, where Chris Wallace brought up a tweet where he compared ISIS to Rand Paul and, of course, Edward Snowden, saying they all were winners in this change in the Patriot Act that happened this last week. Well, Chris Wallace will explain it, and then I'll talk about it after you see it over here.
Of course, this all comes the same week that Congress voted to reform, not to end, but to reform and to some degree to restrict the government surveillance of bulk data collection of our phone records. And after that vote in the Senate, you put out this tweet, which I'd like to put on the screen. You wrote, "Today's Senate NSA vote is a victory for America, for freedom over ignorance, and defeat for ISIS, Edward Snowden, and Rand Paul." Now, I don't have to tell you, you've gotten a lot of blowback for, to some degree, linking ISIS and Rand Paul. Do you want to take that back?
Absolutely not. What Rand Paul did was absolutely disgraceful. Listen, Adam and I can have difference over the NSA. Those reforms, those changes, they were debated, they were worked on. And the fact is that 99% of the Senate wanted the debate to go forward. Rand Paul actually wanted to shut down the NSA for several days, serving no purpose other than for him to use it to raise money for his presidential campaign. That went beyond the limits of intelligent debate, of rational debate, and to me, it violated his position as a senator. We can have differences, we can debate them, we can work them out. You can vote against NSA if you want to, but to use your one-person power to unilaterally shut it down, knowing that it was going to be reopened in several days. So all he was doing was hurting American security, and at the same time, asking people to send him contributions. That was shameful and disgraceful.
So you can see that's definitely a split in the Republican Party, even if Peter King isn't running for president. But one person who looks like he may actually be running for president again is New Jersey Governor Christie, who was over on Face the Nation talking to the new permanent host of Face the Nation, John Dickerson, since Bob Schieffer retired after last week's episode. And Christie also set himself up as a hawk against Rand Paul and another Tea Party Senator, Mike Lee, and who had attacked Christie for questioning the security concerns about NSA spying not happening, and calling it political porn and whatever. It's kind of complicated, but you'll see John Dickerson explains it all in his question to Christie, and Christie definitely shows that he's putting himself on the hawkish side over here.
The actions that were taken this week by Congress has made our country weaker and more vulnerable.
You said when the debate was going on, you can't enjoy your civil liberties if you're in a coffin. Now, Republican Senator Mike Lee said that that was political pornography, meaning that you're trying to scare people. Are you?
No, I'm trying to tell them the truth, as opposed to what Senator Lee is doing and Senator Paul, which is their grandstanding for political purposes. None of them have ever done this. None of them know what they're talking about in this regard. I've done it, and we can do this in a way that makes civil liberties safe and secure. If Congress is really worried about this, John, why don't they use their vigorous oversight capability to make sure that if someone in the intelligence community is overstepping a line, that they bring them back in? And if we need to prosecute folks who are doing that, we will. But instead, what they want to do is to make the country more vulnerable and weaker, take tools away from us that we need. So he can call me whatever he wants to call me. I'm the guy who understands this stuff and has done it, and he's the guy who sits up on Capitol Hill in subcommittee meetings and theorizes about it.
Well, what they say is they hold a hearing and the director of national intelligence comes in and doesn't tell them the truth. So their oversight is blown if they're not getting the straight story from their government.
Let me tell you this, if every time somebody didn't tell me the 100% truth when I was a prosecutor, if I then just threw my hands up and gave up, I wouldn't have been much of a prosecutor. You want to conduct oversight? They have lots of tools in Congress to be able to conduct oversight. They should be doing that. And instead what they're doing is throwing tools out of our toolbox that can help protect the American homeland and have protected the American homeland for the last 13 years.
But the tools that you used, the one they're modifying, was that one you used, this metadata collection? That's what they were modifying. That's not a tool you used.
No,
though.
It's not a tool I use, but it's a tool I'm aware of. And I'm aware of the efficacy of it and how important it is to our efforts to be able to do what we need to do to protect ourselves in a really dangerous world. And so I understand how these things work. I understand how the FISA court works. I understand what you have to do to put probable cause forward. I've done these things. And they're making up fictions, John, down there to try to scare people. I'm not the person scaring people. I'm the person telling people the truth. They're the folks who are scaring people for political.
Now, that doesn't really make sense. Of course, I've talked about on several of previous episodes, and I think even last week's show, about how the NSA spying bulk phone record collection has not been used to solve, like, even a single terrorist threat. There was maybe this one terrorist financing, like $8,500 of financing from one person. I think it was Al-Shabaab terrorist funding. That's like the only thing bulk phone record collection has ever been the key source for stopping never any terrorist threat. But of course, you heard Christie say there that he thought that he understood its efficacy, which means he must understand that it has no efficacy, or almost none, certainly not to stop terrorist attacks. So his claim there that he's a truth teller doesn't seem very truthful to me, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I notice I have about 75 of you watching live at this point, and I've been reading through your comments during the clip, so I appreciate all of you who are keeping me company, and I'm going to move on to another sort of contradictory Christie clip. I guess if he's running for president, first he talks about drug treatment. I guess he's actually talking to John Dickerson at a drug treatment center of some kind. And I think drug treatment as an alternative to the criminal justice system, as a way of helping people who have drug problems, that is obviously a good idea. Drugs, there are drug users, drug abusers, people who have real problems with drugs should get treatment, and it really shouldn't involve jail time. I used to be involved in the drug court as a public defender, and I liked the way it helped people get treatment, but I didn't really like the way it penalized people with jail time, which I don't think is very useful. And so I agree with Christie all the way up until when John Dickerson asked him about marijuana and being a gateway drug, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to put people in jail for marijuana," after saying that people should get drug treatment. And marijuana is not even addictive, so the whole thing doesn't make sense. But you can let me know what you think after I show you that clip here.
We are here at Webster Place, a drug treatment center. Why do you think people end up here?
Oh gosh, all kinds of reasons, John. I mean, I think some of them can be genetic in your background and in your makeup. I think some of them are bad choices that lead people into a disease that they can't find their way out of without help of places like Webster Place. What I've been saying in New Jersey is that we can no longer incarcerate our way out of this problem, that we need to get treatment. This is a disease, and every life is precious. And we need to give people an opportunity to have the tools to be able to deal with their disease. No other disease do we say to folks, No, you don't deserve treatment, that somehow it's a moral failing. This is a disease like anything else, and I think, quite frankly, the war on drugs has been a failure. And what we need to do now is to work on giving people the tools that we know we have available to us. We know how to help people. Let's do it, and let's stop spending money on incarcerating nonviolent people because they are drug addicted. Let's get them into treatment, and let's give them the tools to get better, because every life we save is a miracle.
A president's role. What's a president's role in that kind of an issue?
I think the bully pulpit is the first and most important role. We have to lower stigma, John, to seeking drug and alcohol treatment. Right now, people, as I said before, see it as a moral failing. And if you have a president up there saying, you're not a failure, you're sick, and we want to help you get better. And we're going to, in this country, emphasize for the first time that this is a disease and that we need to give people the treatment that they need to get better. I think that'll move the needle significantly in our country for both lawmakers at the state and local level and for regular people in their neighborhoods to say, we need to treat this a little bit differently and look at it differently.
You said marijuana is a gateway drug. If you were president, would you return the federal prosecutions in the states like Colorado, Washington State?
Yes.
Go after it. So
yes, sir.
If somebody's enjoying that now in their state, if you're president, that's getting turned off.
Correct.
So I was like with Governor Christie there all the way to like the last 20 seconds there, where he totally contradicted pretty much his stance on drugs being a problem of addiction and shouldn't be in the criminal justice system. And of course, marijuana isn't even addictive, so under that model, it's a total waste of criminal justice resources. But I don't even know how to put those two answers together. It doesn't even make sense to me. So, and I noticed during that clip that I had said there were like 75 people watching. Now it's up to like 87, and it's just, I look at how many people there are and then I start reading the comments. So that's how many people there were when I started reading the comments during the last clip, not at like the end of the clip. So I guess it does get refreshed, but I want to show a couple clips now of another entrant into the Republican field. Like I said, not all these entrants are going to be real contenders. It's not that they're so important. It's just there are so many of them. This is Rick Santorum, who used to be a social conservative, but now is trying to play as a populist for the workers, which is something that Chris Wallace let him play up. This is, first I'm going to show how in the introduction, Chris Wallace definitely flattered Rick Santorum by saying he was so effective in the campaign in 2012, even though it's really just because everybody else had dropped out at that point. And then asked him about him being, a populist pro-worker guy now, and you can see his answer. Let me make sure I get the correct clip here. Right, clip 11 over.
A look outside the Beltway at Des Moines, Iowa. And our next guest won the Iowa caucuses in 2012 and then went on to take another 10 states before losing the GOP nomination to Mitt Romney. Now, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum is making another run for the White House, positioning himself as the champion of the working class. Senator Santorum, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris.
You've, and I'm going to use this word advisedly, split with the Republican Party this year, saying that its traditional message is out of touch. Here you are.
We're stuck with a 35-year-old message on the economy. It's a message that says cut taxes for high-income individuals, balance the budget, and cut government. And they're right, but it's insufficient in America today.
You say instead of focusing so much on the business sector, that the GOP must pay more attention to the American worker and his or her family.
Yeah, that's the people who
how would you do it?
Those are the people who are hurting America. And what I've talked about is a multi-range thing. Number one, we have to create opportunities for the 74% of Americans who don't have a college degree, who look at both political parties, and they aren't talking to them. How do we create jobs that create opportunities? And I've focused on something happened in the last 5 years in our economy that has created an opportunity to change things, and that's energy. We now have low, stable energy prices for as far as the eye can see. That is a game changer to allow us to, again, be competitive in manufacturing. Manufacturing is a heavy user of energy, heavy user of natural gas, and now having those low energy prices prices allows us, if we get our tax situation correct, if we get our regulatory environment correct, if we get our trade environment correct, if we get our immigration environment correct, we can create an environment for American workers to get good paying jobs and be able to rise in society.
Well, you talk.
I don't know. Well, he did come out against the TPP later in the interview in a clip I'm not going to show. So he is talking about trade, and he is really rabidly anti-immigrant. So that's another way he can be sort of right-wing pro-worker. And then he also talked there about the non-college educated, which I guess he's trying to go for those like Reagan Democrats, the angry white male vote, or I don't know exactly what he's going for there, but you can let me know what you think. And this next clip includes a national poll of all these Republican candidates, the 10 or 16 or however many there are at this point. And it shows Rick Santorum questioning the Fox News debate rules. You know, Fox News is going to have the first Republican debate, and they're only going to take the top 10. And there may be like 6 who are declared candidates who aren't going to be in the debate, and they're going to use national polls, not even the Iowa poll or the New Hampshire poll, which is the first caucus and primary. And you can see how Rick Santorum challenges that and says it's not fair, and Chris Wallace sort of fights back against that, and some follow-up questions over in this clip.
Finally, the Fox debate I want to talk to you about. You have complained more publicly than any other candidate about the Fox ground rules, which are going to be the top 10 candidates in national polls, and here's the most recent Fox poll, get on the stage. The others don't. As you can see, according to the latest Fox poll, you're tied for 11th at the moment and wouldn't make the cut early on, 2 months to go. What's your objection?
When I won the Iowa caucuses in January of 2012, I was at 4% in the national polls. The idea that we would use a national poll to determine who is going to be one of the finalists in the presidential race, I just think is first off not a good barometer. But the most important thing is we have 16, 15, 14. I don't know who's going to end up running or not running. Really good people. And that shouldn't be something that we should be worried about and try to select down, but we should have the opportunity for everyone to be heard. And you know, if you'd have taken the top 2/3 of the folks in 1992, Bill Clinton wouldn't have been on the stage. If you'd have taken the top 2/3 in 76, Jimmy Carter wouldn't have been on the stage. The idea that the media is going to go in and select a certain group of people and say we're going to make an arbitrary cutoff, and those are the folks we're going to lift up. I just think this is a very fluid thing. There's nobody in the national polls above 10%, and we're not leaving Iowa and New Hampshire to the role that they need to play.
Well,
they should be the ones
a lot of people would say around the country we've given Iowa and New Hampshire enough of a role, and maybe the nation should play something of a role.
I wish that the case was the nation was making this judgment. I mean,
to a certain, one could argue perhaps they are by who's got support. And here's the other point. You put 16 people on a stage. We're talking about everybody getting 4 minutes. I was on the stage with you as a moderator back in 2012, and frankly, you used to complain a lot about how you didn't get enough time for questions. Under your plan with 16 people, you're going to get even less time to talk.
I would suggest that you just divide it up into 2 tranches of 8. You do, just either randomly selective or take the odd numbers in one in the pollings and the even numbers in others, so you have a nice mix of folks at the top and folks at the bottom, and you have 2 back-to-back
Well, the flip side
debates.
is what Carly Fiorina said, which is, you've given me a goal, you've given me 2 months, I'm going to get in.
Well, but again, is that what campaign should be about? Is trying to measure whether we meet some criteria in a debate, or whether we should be actually talking to voters and trying to convince them that we're the best candidate for the president.
We'll have to debate that.
We'll find that out.
Senator Santorum.
Now, I don't often agree with Rick Santorum on a lot of issues, but I actually am a little leery of having the networks winnow out the candidates based on national polls before a lot of people are really paying attention. And his idea of taking the 16 candidates in sort of 2 groups of 8, where there are some top poll getters and some lower people mixed in or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm one of those people who thinks more debates are better than less, and I watch all the debates, and I find them really interesting. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but and think that they're boring and tedious and you don't get much. But it's also good for Democrats, I think, to have the Republicans debate as much as possible and drive each other to the right to please their base, and that'll make them easier to defeat. So that's sort of a partisan take on it as well. And before I leave the subject of Republicans and the Republican presidential candidates, I want to show one more clip. This is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Jonathan Karl talked to Senator Joni Ernst. He's not the only one who talked to Joni Ernst. Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union also talked to her, but for some reason Jonathan Karl was saying he got the first or the exclusive, or maybe it did come first, I don't know. But you can see he gives a little intro that does show that clip I was talking about before, where she talks about castrating hogs as her experience to cut pork in Washington. And then Jonathan Karl asks her if she's trying to become a kingmaker by starting up this, ride and roast to replace the Democratic Senator Harkin's steak fry. And she sort of says she's just an advocate for Iowa, I guess is her answer over in this clip.
Thank you all. First-year Senator Joni Ernst, the woman behind this year's roast and ride and the most sought-after Republican in Iowa. I sat down with her at the Machine Shed restaurant in Iowa for her first national interview.
I grew up castrating hogs on an Iowa farm.
From those hogs to these hogs.
This is my bike.
Joni Ernst is having no problem proving that right now she's the most popular Republican in Iowa. Her first annual Roast and Ride fundraising event drew 7 presidential hopefuls. Are you the new Iowa kingmaker?
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that. I am an advocate for Iowa. I have invited every Republican candidate that has been participating in different events throughout the year.
Ernst is making a
So I thought that was sort of a bracket to the first clip I showed in the Republican topic, or the first substantive clip where Dana Bash had talked about the ride and roast and compared it to Senator Harkin's steak fry. And I don't know if Joni Ernst is now going to be the kingmaker in Iowa for Republicans like Tom Harkin was for the Democrats. But I want to move over to the Democrats now and Hillary Clinton's run, and there'll be one clip of her new challenger, Lincoln Chafee, in a minute. But first I'm going to show another clip of Joni Ernst, or this is 2 clips from CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash seemed to want to set up this rivalry or this conflict between Senator Joni Ernst and Hillary Clinton. I guess Hillary Clinton had come into Iowa when Joni Ernst was running for the Senate and had said being a woman wasn't enough. And Dana Bash really wanted to get that going as some conflict. First, she teased it. You can see over in this clip.
And up next, I'll give you an inside look at this weekend's colorful presidential event here in Iowa and my one-on-one with Joni Ernst, the woman behind it. See how she throws Hillary Clinton's own words about being a female candidate right back at her. We're live from Iowa, just outside the state capitol. Stay with us.
So you can see Dana Bash there saying that Senator Joni Ernst is throwing Hillary Clinton's words right back at her. But if you watch the actual interview, it's like Dana Bash is teeing it up, like saying, please, please throw these words at Hillary Clinton. And the thing is, the words are, it's not enough to be a woman. And Hillary Clinton's point was that Republican women aren't really for some important women's issues, reproductive justice, paid parental leave, some other important issues. And Dana Bash never brings any of those up. She just lets Joni Ernst get away with saying that, women want a strong defense and, strong leaders. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after you see it here.
Last question. I was here with Hillary Clinton when she was campaigning for your opponent, Bruce Braley, in the Senate race. She was very clear, and she said, it's not enough to be a woman.
I would say, Hillary, it's not enough to be a woman. You have to care about women's issues. And women's issues here in Iowa are that we have a strong economy. We have jobs that our sons and daughters can go off to someday. We have a great educational system. And women want strong national defense. We want to know that our families are going to be safe.
You're throwing her words against you back at her now, aren't you?
I am, because I do believe you have to be a leader with a vision, and you have to show Iowans that you want it.
And not just a woman.
And not just a woman.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on this event.
Thank you.
So yeah, I thought that was a little odd that Dana Bash was sort of creating that conflict. It didn't seem, I mean, I guess that's something that Joni Ernst has said before, and so she was just trying to get a good soundbite out of her, but it seemed a little manipulative to me. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Now I want to show a couple clips from Rick Perry, and this is about something that Hillary Clinton said in her campaigning around Iowa. She called out several Republicans by name and said that they were promoting these voter ID laws to stop minority voters from being able to vote, to cut down on minority votes, voter turnout, and therefore get elected with less people being able to vote. That's like a Republican strategy. I've talked about that in some edited, produced videos in the past about how there's no such thing as in-person voter ID fraud, yet Republicans are trying to stop people who don't have specific kinds of ID from being able to vote that disproportionately affects minorities and the elderly and a lot of important Democratic constituencies. And you can see how first over on Face the Nation, talking to John Dickerson, Rick Perry responds to being one of the people who Hillary Clinton called out on this. And he has some talking points down on this about how Hillary Clinton's not really attacking him. She's attacking the people of Texas over in this clip.
Governor, I want to get your reaction here. Hillary Clinton attacked you directly. Let's listen to what she said, and I want to get your reaction.
Here in Texas, former Governor Rick Perry signed a law that a federal court said was actually written with the purpose of discriminating against minority voters. He applauded when the Voting Rights Act was gutted and said the lost protections were outdated and unnecessary.
Governor, your reaction, but also Hillary Clinton's folks, and she says there really aren't a whole host of cases of voter fraud and that this is something you're just trumping up. Your reaction?
I think that the people of the state of Texas overwhelmingly support voter identification, and that's what this is really about. Hillary Clinton believes that all wisdom emanates out of Washington, D.C. She's the classic Washington insider, and she wants Washington to take this over. Listen, we've seen this with the Affordable Care Act. We've seen it with education policy. If you think that Washington needs to be controlling our voting and our oversight for voting, I just don't agree with that. And I think most Americans believe that the governors, the legislatures, and it overwhelmingly passed in the state of Texas. She's basically looking at the people of Texas and other states that have put these types of voter identification laws into place and saying, we don't trust you.
So you can see those are Rick Perry's talking points. And why do I call them talking points? Because I'm going to show you over on CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash asked Rick Perry the same question that I'm not going to show the clip, and he gave the same talking points. But then she asked this interesting follow-up question about why is it okay in Texas to use your gun license to go and vote, but not your college ID? And you can see Rick Perry cannot think through a question like that, or at least not, he wasn't able to here. He just went back to those same talking points and didn't really answer that specific question. He said, well, why do you need a ID to get a library card or to, I can't remember, go to a government building or whatever it is. He never differentiated between the gun license and the college ID, which is one of the reasons that a federal judge said that the Texas voter ID law had the intent to discriminate. And you can see that over here.
Specifically, the argument that she and other Democrats are making is, why would you say that it's okay to have a gun registration, a gun license, and not a college ID?
Well, why would you say that you need a photo ID to get a library book or to get on an airplane? This is a state issue, and this is an issue that the people of the state of Texas overwhelmingly support. And so I don't know who she's playing to, but she's not playing to the people of Texas, and I don't think she's playing to the Americans that believe that the sanctity of the vote is really important, and you need to have a photo ID to go vote. It's that simple. The people of Texas wanted it, and whichever state Hillary Clinton considers to be her home state,
what about her
she goes home and she argues there not to have it.
And what about
So yeah, like I said, you can see Rick Perry just went right back to his talking points there, could not actually think about a question that he didn't have talking points on, about the gun license versus the college ID. And I think that is kind of telling as to whether there's going to be a point where he has another one of those oops moments. You know, that's what Rick Perry is famous for in the 2012 primary campaign, where he said he was going to list 3 things and he listed 2 things and couldn't remember the third and said, oops, I guess I can't remember, or whatever it was he said. And I saw one pundit on Fox News Sunday, I can't remember which one, say that means he has low expectations, so maybe he'll be able to beat the low expectations. But I don't really consider Rick Perry to be a contender, but you never know what's going to happen. Stranger things have happened, I guess, and he was governor of the state of Texas, and that was the last Republican president of the United States was a governor of the state of Texas, who also didn't seem to be that bright in a lot of the things that he said. So anything could happen, I guess. But I want to move on to the last clip on the issue of Hillary Clinton running for president in 2016. I showed a couple clips of Rick Perry attacking her over the voting rights thing. Now I want to show a former Republican, now turned independent, then now running for the Democratic nomination for president in 2016 from this former senator from Rhode Island, Lincoln Chafee. And this is also an interview with Dana Bash, and I thought she really focused on the wrong thing here. In her, or at least in terms of the priority. I'm not going to show the follow-up question where she talked about some of the more important things, but I guess Lincoln Chafee in his announcement talked about these like 10 ideas to make the world more peaceful, or that, and one of them was switching over to the metric system, and Dana Bash really fixated on that, as you can see in her first question to Lincoln Chafee, and then her follow-up question over in this clip.
Hillary Clinton remains the clear frontrunner in the Democratic presidential race, despite challengers from the left. One of them, former Rhode Island Governor and Senator Lincoln Chafee, is joining me now. And Governor, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Let's just start with what everybody is talking about out of your announcement this week, and that is your pledge to turn this country to the metric system like Europe and most of the rest of the world is using. It seems like an unusual thing in today's day and age for that to be the thing that people are taking away, and perhaps unusual for that to be the thing that you're pushing so hard as your platform. Why is that?
Well, the theme of my announcement was for us to wage peace in the world, for America to change the way we're acting in the world. And I labeled that waging peace. And I had about 10 proposals, and going metric was one of those. Of the 10 proposals, better relations with Russia, better relations with our South American neighbors, no more drone strikes, no more torture, no more warrantless wiretapping, let's bring Snowden home, a number of proposals. And this was one, and it's part of being an internationalist. There are only 2 other countries that aren't metric, Myanmar and Liberia. And so it's time for America, not only economically, but symbolically, to join the rest of the world.
And I have to say, just to people who are Americans who are very comfortable without the metric system, they're looking at this and saying, really? Is this guy kidding me? Does he get it?
Well, I lived in Canada when they went. I was working on the horse racetrack in Canada after graduating from college. I was up there for about 7 years working on the horse racetrack, and they went metric, and it was very easy. And I know that many of the scientific community, the healthcare community that have to deal internationally, the business community, are saying this is way overdue. Ronald Reagan talked about it. Others have talked about it. But now, at this point in American history, where we squandered so much credibility with telling the rest of the world there were weapons of mass destruction, we invaded another country, just so un-American that it's time, in light of the squandered credibility that we have, to make a symbolic gesture to the rest of the world. And it's also good economically, so there's many benefits to it.
So I don't know why it is that Dana Bash sort of fixated on the switch to the metric system there instead of the rest of Lincoln Chafee's peace agenda. I don't think he's going to be a real contender for the Democrats, but I think what he's trying to point out there is that he's to the left of Hillary Clinton on foreign policy, even though he's a former Republican. He was actually against the Iraq War. In another interview during the week, I think it was on All In with Chris Hayes, I saw him talk about how he voted against the Iraq War while Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War, and he was going to be the only candidate against the Iraq War, comparing himself to Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, although I guess Bernie Sanders was also against the Iraq War. But anyway, that's the last clip I want to show on the topic of Hillary Clinton's run for the presidency in 2016. I showed like 14 clips on the Republicans, and 4 or 5 clips on Hillary Clinton. Now we're going to move over to what may actually be the biggest threat to the United States in the coming years, as I'll get to by the end of these clips, which is China. And in that last clip, I'll also have a little bit of a reference to the threat from Russia. But before I get to the long-term Chinese threat and whatever threat there is from Russia, I want to cover this hacking incident that happened this last week. I guess the federal government employee records were hacked, and it seems to have come from China, or at least that's how it's being spun. And that was actually the top story on Fox News Sunday. They were so different from the other Sunday shows. I want to show the intro to Fox News Sunday and how they really hyped the China threat, and then they puffed up Rick Santorum as a real contender. And then they even talked a little bit about Caitlyn Jenner over in this clip.
I'm Chris Wallace. It could be the biggest cyber attack in U.S. history. Did Chinese hackers strike again?
Regardless of who it is, and regardless of what their ultimate aim is, the administration takes this very seriously and recognizes it as a threat to our national security.
We'll discuss the breach and what we should do about it with 2 key congressmen, Pete King and Adam Schiff. Then, Rick Santorum won 11 states and 4 million votes in the 2012 Republican primaries. This time, can he win the nomination?
The last race, we changed the debate. This race, we can change this nation.
GOP presidential candidate Rick Santorum, only on Fox News Sunday. Plus, Bruce Jenner becomes Caitlyn. The Sunday panel weighs in on the latest sexual culture war, and also the debate over the female Viagra pill. And our Power Player of the Week, Bush.
Those were the 3 top stories on Fox News Sunday, which was very different from any of the other programs. I guess all the other programs had the Republican field, which I guess that Rick Santorum story was about the Republican field, but none of them had female Viagra or Bruce Jenner coming out as Caitlyn Jenner. And though they all discussed it a little bit, I'm not going to discuss it. It's not one of my topics. But I thought that was kind of strange, the way that Fox News Sunday was really hyping this Chinese threat, especially the hacker threat, and blaming it on China, even though it turns out, if you watched all the Sunday shows, no one was saying that it was certain that the Chinese government was responsible. Although in this next clip I'm going to show Fox News Sunday, from Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace says reportedly China is responsible, and then he hands it over to their reporter Catherine Herridge, who just gives basically the most you can say is some evidence the Chinese government or someone in China may be responsible, as you can see over in this clip.
U.S. officials are warning millions of federal employees to be on the alert after their personal information was stolen in a massive cyber attack, reportedly by China. What makes this especially troubling is it's just the latest in a series of similar attacks. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Herridge has the latest. Catherine.
Chris, the Office of Personnel Management, also known as OPM, is now the fourth government agency hacked within the last year. And a U.S. official says this data breach could affect virtually every branch of government. And what's more concerning to investigators this morning is growing evidence that it's not an isolated incident, but rather part of a state-sponsored campaign by China that involves the micro-targeting of security clearance information for economic gain, blackmail, impersonation, as well as facilitating future attacks. OPM does 90% of federal background investigations.
The Office of Personnel Management is a real attractive target because it represents the holy grail of access within the United States government. Even though this is a micro-target, this is a micro-target of probably the most valuable information. And that's what makes this so highly dangerous.
Republican Senator Susan Collins, a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said the breach was, quote, yet another indication of a foreign power probing successfully and focusing on what appears to be data that would identify people with security clearances. Former intelligence officials say the attack's high level of organization also points to a nation state and the likely backing of Chinese military units such as PLA 61398, housed in this nondescript office in suburban Shanghai. The unit is known for its use of APTs, or advanced persistent threats, that are designed to harvest information covertly and not cripple systems. And that's exactly what happened at OPM. Cybersecurity analysts believe it was hacked because it's a softer target than the NSA or Defense Department. One key question is whether intelligence agency employee information was also stolen, Chris.
So you can see in that report, after Chris Wallace started by saying it's reportedly by China, that all Catherine Herridge could say was that, evidence points to likely these Chinese sources, but nothing definitive. And I'll show something even clearer on that from a Democrat, Adam Schiff, in just a minute. But first, I want to show a clip from the Republican who was on Fox News Sunday, Peter King, who actually passed up an opportunity to blame the Obama administration for this hacking incident. Chris Wallace kind of teed him up and said, well, isn't Obama to blame for this? And Peter King didn't even take the bait, believe it or not, over in, let me make sure I get the correct clip here. Yeah, is that clip number 21? Yes, over here.
I want to take you back to what President Obama said about hacking in February. Here he is.
The cyber world is sort of the wild, wild west. And to some degree, we're asked to be the sheriff.
But 3 months before that, the Inspector General at OPM, the agency that was hacked, warned that that agency's computer system was a hacker's dream, which raises the question, Congressman King, did President Obama fail to safeguard his own administration?
Christian, we have to get a full after-action report. I don't want to prejudge this, but obviously something went wrong. Obviously, this is a threat that we have to face, and we have to be doing more than we are doing right now. Now, Congress has passed 2 bills. The House has passed 2 bills in recent months, which would at least begin to address some of the cybersecurity issues, but more has to be done. I think we have to find a way also to make effective use of all our intelligence and surveillance apparatus, even if that involves the NSA, others, because we're talking about nation states here. Whether it turns out to be China or not, there's certainly a likely suspect. And we have to, I believe, not be afraid to use all of our tools to try to stop this, because this could be devastating to our country if this got worse.
So you see, Peter King not only didn't blame Obama when given the chance, he didn't even certainly, or say for certain, that China was responsible. And Chris Wallace over on Fox News Sunday also had on Democrat Adam Schiff and tried to get him to say that, or asked him what the evidence was that China is responsible. And you can see Adam Schiff says that they can't attribute it at this point based on, the rules of intelligence or something like that. And that However, the evidence is that it's someone in China, or either the government or some private entity in China related to the government, over in this clip.
I want to pick up on that in a moment, but Congressman Schiff, how strong is the evidence that the Chinese were in fact behind this? And there are reports that this was not done to try to steal information for identity theft. It wasn't a crime, that in fact this was an intelligence theft to try to find out who to survey or who to try to recruit as a spy. So how damaging was the information that whoever hacked into OPM that they actually stole?
Chris, it's very valuable information, and while we're not allowed to comment on the attribution yet, we've gotten very good at attribution. It's hard work, but we do it well now. And there are only two possibilities here with an attack this sophisticated: either a state actor or a group of very sophisticated private hackers who often work in concert with the state. And the motivation, as you pointed out, is either going to be fraud in the terms of ripping off people's identity, or if it's a state-sponsored attack, it will be personal information that can be exploited to identify people who might be working in the intelligence community. It could be used to enable other spear phishing attacks. And the real challenge, I think, Chris, is that in this asymmetric battlefield of cyber warfare, those on the offense have all the advantage. It's very expensive to defend. You just need one open door and you're vulnerable. And you can often attack with anonymity and be free from repercussions. And I think one of the big things that we really have to do, in addition to our defense, is figure out when we're going to go on offense and how we're going to provide a deterrent to future attacks.
So you can watch that full interview where they talk more about U.S. offensive capabilities in cyber warfare by clicking on the Fox News link, Fox News Sunday link down in the video description. That's the last clip from Fox News Sunday I'm going to show. But I want to show one more clip on this China attack. This is something very similar from Republican Mike McCaul. He's chair of the House Homeland Security Committee. He was over on Face the Nation on CBS talking to John Dickerson, and he said something similar. First, he said this weird thing about how, or it's a tautology, I guess, where, this may be the most significant attack ever, which is significant, right? That's kind of a tautology. But then he talks about this same thing about not being able to attribute it necessarily to the Chinese, but that in his opinion, perhaps it was the Chinese, or some words like that, over in this last clip on the Chinese hacking threat. But before I get to something about China and Russia and their more long-term threat here.
This was the most significant breach of federal networks in U.S. history. And that's very significant. We look at the threat indicators. Who has a motive intent to steal this data? This is a huge data mining project, and it targeted political appointees in the federal government and federal employees, 4 million of them. In my judgment, this was an attack by China against the United States government. It quantifies to espionage, and that raises all sorts of issues that we need to deal with.
And if I can just be clear, you mean China, the government of, as opposed to just a person who is in China?
That has not been the attribution, what they call it, to go back to the source, has not been confirmed by the United States government. But I believe, in my judgment, that all the threat indicators point to the fact that it is China, and perhaps nation state sponsored, because of the way it was done. It was not done to steal credit card information and that kind of theft. It was done to get personal information on political appointees in the federal government and federal employees, to exploit them so that later down the road they can use us for espionage to either recruit spies or compromise individuals in the federal government.
So, like I said, there's no definite attribution to China, but that seems to be where everyone is pointing the finger on the Sunday shows this morning, both Democrats and Republicans, although mostly Republicans from the clips I showed you. And before I leave this topic of the China threat from the hacking, I want to show this interesting clip from the Real-Time Overtime on HBO, Real Time with Bill Maher. After they broadcast the show on HBO, then they do this overtime that is actually live on YouTube and then recorded on YouTube. You can see the entire 12.5 minutes from this week's overtime at a link down in the video description. This is about 50 seconds where this is just pretty much Time Magazine's Ian Bremer. I don't know much about him, but they were talking about what is the biggest threat to the United States, compared to ISIS, which everyone seems to be hyping. And someone talked about the environment, and someone talked about police racism. And this is Ian Bremer talking about China and Russia in a way that I think kind of makes sense in this clip.
I'd say long term, China is the biggest threat because it's the only country with a global strategy. They're spending over $1 trillion. They're trying to align countries towards themselves. Ultimately, it undermines the dollar, and that's going to affect all of us. But in the near term, it's the single most powerful individual in the world, Vladimir Putin, who is in decline and very unhappy and wants to punish us and the potential for costs in the next 6, 12 months.
He's personally in decline, or the country?
The country's in decline, and he is controlling so much power, his ability to do things that would truly cause...
So do you think he'd do something crazy and irrational?
I think that, I think we're punishing him, and I think his reaction is he wants the Americans to understand that that's not costless for us. And so if you ask me where you'd have an integrity cyber attack against a big public institution or a bank, the sort of thing that could really lead to a surprise that we don't want to see.
So yeah, and then the conversation spun off into this whole other topic, which is why I cut it there. You can, like I said, watch the whole thing by clicking on the link to Real Times Overtime down in the video description. But I kind of agree with that about China being the biggest long-term strategic threat to the United States. That's almost like math if you look at their economic growth and military growth and the way it's colliding with the U.S. empire. That is sort of the biggest long-term threat to the United States, and I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a threat, but it certainly could be, just based on military and economic power. And what Ian Bremer said there about Russia also made me think, I wonder if this hacking threat could have come from Russia and they tried to make it look like it came from China. I don't know how. I don't really have that much confidence in all those people who are blaming it on China being correct. I mean, maybe they are. That seems to be the message that's going out on the news today. But, I mean, who knows who's really responsible for that hacking of all those employee records. From what Ian Bremer said there about Russia wanting to lash out at the United States, and then, a lot of the best hackers actually are in Russia. I mean, China has a lot of good hackers too, but... Anyway, you can let me know what you think about all that, and having looked at China and then a little bit Russia as a threat to U.S. national security, which I think in some ways makes more sense than the hyped-up threat from ISIS, I want to show 4 clips now on the U.S. war against ISIS. The first 3 all come from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which was guest hosted by Martha Raddatz, who I've talked about many times, having a really close relationship with the U.S. military, which is sort of a double-edged sword in that sometimes she seems to be like the vehicle for their message, and not as critical as maybe she might be, although she often asks them tough questions, and the upside is she gets really good access that in some ways no one, or sometimes no one else gets this access, going places and talking to people that you don't see a lot on the Sunday morning shows. Serving military personnel, generals who are in charge of the fight, and that's what you're going to see in these first few clips in terms of the U.S. fight against ISIS. First, you can see how Martha Raddatz won't even reveal where she's reporting from because the military doesn't want her to. And then she talks about her exclusive access as a result in this clip.
Good morning. I'm Martha Raddatz. We're coming to you from a Persian Gulf nation that we've been asked not to disclose, where the U.S.-led military operation against ISIS is being coordinated. Temperatures here hovering around 120 degrees. Behind me, you see one of the Predator drones, or as the Air Force calls them, remotely piloted aircraft. And that's a Hellfire missile hanging below. They fly 24/7, collecting intelligence and carrying out deadly airstrikes. I'm about to take you inside the heart of the command center of the U.S.-led campaign to defeat the jihadist group. the first time TV cameras have been allowed inside. Just this week, an American general saying this fight will last a generation. And as we come on the air this morning, the commander-in-chief, President Obama, has just landed in Germany for a series of urgent meetings with allies at the G7 summit. A major focus, his plans to stop the disturbing ISIS surge, a strategy that has come under fire. So we begin with ABC.
And she was about to cut to this report from Terry Moran with President Obama in Germany talking to U.S. allies. And I'm going to get to that after I show this next clip, which is 6 minutes long, I think. But it's really worth watching because it is sort of a microcosm of this double-edged sword I was talking about, where Martha Raddatz first gets this really exclusive access to the nerve center of the U.S. fight against ISIS in this unnamed Persian Gulf country. You saw she wouldn't even say where she was because the military didn't want her to. And she shows all this stuff in a way that makes it look cool and, you know, high tech, and sells the military to the U.S. public. And then she gets this exclusive access to these generals who are in charge of the fight. And you'll see all of their answers are really like cheerleading for the Iraqi military, but Martha Raddatz does ask them some fairly tough questions, and so you can let me know what you think about the double-edged sword in terms of her like cool access, showing the cool nerve center of the fight and all the, you know, displays and drones and when I say it's cool, I'm saying, you know, drones are kind of cool if you divorce them in your mind from the fact that they're killing people, which of course is not cool at all. But that's kind of the point I'm making, and you can see it all in this 6 minute clip that or 6 minute 20-second clip I'll discuss with you after you watch it here.
Right, now inside the U.S. headquarters to take down ISIS. This joint operations base in the Persian Gulf is where the U.S. military coordinates every airstrike. All the intelligence for today and the future comes through here. It was 1 year ago today that ISIS swept into Mosul in Iraq, pulling the U.S. into a war we thought had ended. Right now, we're going inside the massive operations center and going one-on-one with the general commanding the mission to defeat ISIS for good.
This is really the centerpiece of our current operations in Iraq and Syria.
Here in this command center, the war room of all war rooms in the battle against ISIS, the fight is 24/7. Video feeds flow in from the battlefield, and every bit of intelligence, from satellite feeds to Twitter feeds, monitored minute by minute. So this is really where you coordinate everything, the whole battle space.
That's correct. This is where the current operations pieces are happening.
There's a fires desk coordinating airstrikes on Syria and Iraq, the intelligence desk, social media, logistics, and spots for all the coalition partners. What are we looking at now?
You're seeing the final results of the aircraft acquiring a particular target I talked about earlier.
In other words, when the missiles are fired or the bombs are dropped.
Correct.
This is the first time cameras have been allowed in.
Firepower, artillery pieces, improvised explosive devices, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, weapons, etc. We've taken those things off the battlefield.
A battlefield that a year ago was just emerging. Last June, ISIS, also known as Daesh, firmly stamped its name across the map of the Middle East, marching with terrifying speed across Syria and Iraq, grabbing world attention as it quickly overran Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, even threatening Baghdad. I was there last year when Iraqis were volunteering in droves to protect their capital. There seems to be an incredible zeal among these young men. They seem absolutely fearless, but they really have no idea what they're getting into. And neither did the rest of the world. Today, the U.S. is back at war with more than 3,000 troops on the ground in Iraq, conducting more than 3,400 airstrikes in Iraq and Syria, and spending more than $2.5 billion. In charge of this massive effort, known as Operation Inherent Resolve, is Lieutenant General James Terry.
I think there's progress in the campaign in a whole range of places. We're starting to see Daesh see cover in terms of physically digging into positions. The first phase of that campaign was halt Daesh. We feel like we have done that.
You believe you've halted
I do.
ISIS?
I do.
It doesn't look that way. Recent images paint a different picture of the enemy overtaking the Iraqi city of Ramadi, setting off 30 massive car bombs, some suicide bombs using American Humvees stolen from fleeing Iraqi forces. Retaking that city is now the next main objective. You think they're ready to go?
I think they're preparing to go right now.
So you wouldn't say hold back until you know what you're doing here?
I think they've got some things they have to put in place, and I think they're making the necessary moves to do that.
General Robert Castelvi is just out of Iraq, where he worked directly with Iraqi forces.
They are ready to go in. We have assisted them in developing a campaign plan to be an operational plan to be able to go back in. They've already started going back in.
So they've started to try to retake Ramadi.
They've already started.
You've been in Iraq before. You've seen the billions of dollars we've spent on this effort. Why will it work this time?
It's going to work. It has to work. This time, I think they're much more embracing of the training, much more embracing of the equipment that we're bringing.
Key to supporting Iraqi troops as they take back Ramadi, U.S. and coalition airstrikes. This is an MQ-1, a remotely piloted aircraft, or as we call them, drones. They are in the fight 24/7 over Iraq, over Syria, armed with Hellfire missiles. How those missiles reach their targets is the center of a heated debate. Should U.S. troops be on the front lines with the Iraqi security forces, side by side, helping to call in those airstrikes? The troops who would be there, JTACs, or Joint Terminal Attack Controllers. Right now, this JTAC veteran of 12 deployments has been calling in those strikes remotely from a strike cell in Iraq. If it was up to him, the JTACs would be forward in the fight.
I think we'd find it an easier way of doing it.
More effective in getting more targets.
More effective, yeah.
But even though they're not up close, they can see how ISIS has adapted to the firepower being aimed their way.
They have more of a tactical head. They're more disciplined than I've seen in the past. They're more of a fighter than sitting back and planting the IEDs more.
Right now, they're doing horrible things and throwing people off the tops of buildings. Do you think about that?
I think they all need to die.
General Terry says plenty already have. We keep hearing about numbers of fighters who were killed, number of ISIS fighters. You heard the Deputy Secretary of State the other day say 10,000 ISIS fighters. Do you know that's true?
That's a good number.
And Terry takes pride in what he says are a very low number of civilian casualties in the airstrikes, but he knows this fight will be a long one.
I think it will take time. I think there will be ups and downs. Let's continue to work with Iraqis and make them successful, and I think that's the way ahead.
So I thought Martha Raddatz did ask some difficult questions, and she showed the way the Iraqi troops were not fighting that well. And, she asked that one general, why is it going to work this time? And his answer was, well, it's got to work this time. But, that's not very persuasive if you listen to, like, the Secretary of Defense of the United States in a clip I showed a couple weeks ago, Ash Carter, saying that they lost Ramadi because they didn't have the will to fight. And no one said that they were necessarily ready right now to retake that. So it's a difficult balance there between, like I said, the double-edged sword of Martha Raddatz having that access and in some ways conveying the message of the military, but also getting information that no one else gets. And watching that 6-minute plus clip there, I'm glad I watched it. I thought it was informative, even though I'm skeptical of some of the messages I was getting from the military. And I don't want to divorce the coolness of some of the technology they showed there with the fact that it's killing people. And there was one little blurb at the end there about how there were so few civilians killed, but I don't really have any way of verifying that, and I don't think it was verified by Martha Raddatz or ABC News, and I know that there has been some unacceptable collateral damage from drone strikes in Afghanistan and Pakistan, so I'm not sure why it would be any different in Iraq and Syria, but especially when they don't have those forward air controllers they were talking about at the end. But that's pretty much all I want to say about that 6-minute clip, but you can tell me what you think about that interesting but double-edged sword in terms of access and co-option by the military, that clip there. You can let me know what you think about that down in the video description, or down in the comment section. And if you want to watch the entire This Week with George Stephanopoulos, there's a link down in the video description to that. And I'm going to show one more clip from that show. This is Terry Moran, their reporter. He was reporting from Austria on a summit going on in the Alps in Germany that Obama is attending with European allies, and most importantly, I think, for what they were talking about in those last two clips, the Prime Minister of Iraq was there meeting with President Obama, so maybe they'll work some stuff out, Obama with Prime Minister Abadi. And here's how Terry Moran reported on that this morning here.
Good morning, Martha. President Obama's arrived in these splendid alpine surroundings at a moment when the world is looking to him for leadership, especially in the fight against ISIS. German Chancellor Merkel welcoming the president in the small town of Krun. Mr. Obama hoisting a mid-morning beer, but the agenda here is packed. ISIS right at the top of it. They are on the march again in Syria and Iraq. And once again, Iraqi troops just running away from the battlefield in Ramadi. Defense Secretary Carter saying they showed no will to fight. So President Obama will meet here with the Iraqi leader, Prime Minister Abadi. He wants a lot more U.S. assistance in the fight. Americans are disappointed in him. They don't see him as the leader for change and reconciliation they'd hoped. Mr. Obama, since the beginning of his presidency, has been trying to extract the U.S. from its deep entanglements in the Middle East, but events keep dragging him back, and the leaders here, they don't think his strategy against ISIS is working, and they want to see him step up his game. Martha?
So that's what's going on in Europe right now. President Obama is in Europe meeting with a bunch of leaders, not just the Europeans, but also Prime Minister Abadi of Iraq, and talking about the fight against ISIS. Apparently they're also talking about the threat from Russia and whether they're going to ease sanctions against Russia, though that wasn't in that report from Terry Moran. But before I leave this topic of ISIS, I want to show one clip, last clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. This is Bill Maher talking about the Homeland Security threat, and specifically about the airport security. The TSA had this bad report this last week that 95% of bombs and guns got through TSA security at U.S. airports, and Bill Maher was talking to this counterterrorism expert, Philip Mudd, I guess is his name, and saying that we should profile like the Israelis do, which is not really an accurate portrayal of what the Israelis do. And also, they both agreed that even though most Muslims aren't terrorists, most terrorists are Muslims, which is not true, as I'll discuss after you watch that last clip for tonight here.
I want to get to that in a second, but one more question about the TSA, because I don't know why we can't have airport security like Israel does. Nobody wants...
Are you kidding me? I mean, Israel's the size of Delaware. There's like one airport there. They profile people, which we don't allow to do in this country.
Should we?
No, I don't think we should.
Really?
No.
People in your... Please. People in your profession...
Oh, we'd love to do it.
And you do... And you not only love to do it, that's what you do all day, as you should. All police work is profiling to some degree. The problem is people can't keep two things in their head at the same time. One, that the vast majority of Muslims, of course, are not terrorists, but two, most terrorism comes from Muslims. Both of things are indisputably true.
Sure.
Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So don't tell me that the people in your profession don't profile. They just don't say it out loud.
Well, but hold on.
And even the liberals who would boo the idea that we're profiling secretly like that you people do it.
But hold on a second. We profile already. Look, we profile already. We profile old people who don't have to take their shoes off. So we've taken a step in this direction. What you're talking about is, like, I suspect.
Well, I don't know. I guess in a way that is profiling by saying old people aren't the ones. But the profiling that Israelis do is behavioral profiling, not ethnic profiling. They, if you've ever been through an Israeli airport, they don't ask the like stupid yes or no questions that you hear from the TSA, like did you pack your bag yourself and that kind of stuff. They like actually have much more intensively trained people who don't profile you based on the way you look, but on your answers to a bunch of questions like, so why are you visiting Israel, or what's your trip about, or and what are your interests here, and they engage people in conversation and look at their behaviors, whether they act nervously and whether they have answers to unexpected questions. And it's behavioral profiling. It's not based on the way people look, because there are a billion Muslims in the world and they look a lot of different ways, and if you can't really profile people by the way they look in terms of being Muslim. And anyway, the one other thing I wanted to talk about that Bill Maher said there is, most Muslims aren't terrorists, but most terrorists are Muslim, and I actually debunked that. What was it, months ago?
Hillary Clinton remains the clear frontrunner in the Democratic...
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Yeah, that's... I put a link down in the video description to my video, Are Most Terrorists Muslims, from like a year ago, where I already debunked this, and I showed both... I showed some studies that show that most terrorists are like ethnic separatists that are not Muslim. If you look in the United States, if there are these... Anyway, there's a link down to that in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, then I will put a annotation that you can click on. You can watch this video and find out most terrorists are not Muslim. Anyway, I'm way over time. I actually have some other things I have to go do right now, so I appreciate all of you who joined me for this live show. I guess we've got 103 people. We almost... we got over 120 at one point, and for those who are watching this as a recorded show, like I said, you can skip back and forth between the 4 different topics using indexes I'll put in within a few hours. And also, if you put your mouse up in the corner right here, you should see a little eye that you can click on and either make a one-time donation through fan fundraising on YouTube, or make a monthly pledge through Patreon. I think I'm over 40 patrons now, and I'm I'm over halfway to my goal of $400 a month. That would be $100 for each of these Sunday shows. It takes me about 12 hours to put it together and broadcast it every Sunday, so that's still not quite minimum wage, but I think that would make it so that I could not put as many ads in. Someone asked me about that, who's already one of my patrons. Once I reach that goal, I think I'll just put one ad at the beginning, and as of right now, they sort of supplement each other. The ad income and the patron income still don't get me to where I was a couple years ago in terms of getting close to making minimum wage for the hours I put in. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the 28 clips I picked out for you from the Sunday morning shows and from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and I hope they left you a little bit more informed about some of the issues, especially the corporate media focused issues. But I hope I will be putting an excerpt video out or some other video out during the week, and then next Sunday join me again at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, or close to that, as close as I can get, and I'll have clips next week from hopefully all 5 of the shows, and more Bill Maher. And until next week, I guess I'll be seeing you all around the internet.